awesome time of change. We start out by, be the change you wish to see in the world. And the intention, of course, is to be who you truly are. And to be at the Inspirational Expo is to see how much you can be inspired by those who have set the stage. And on the stage, we have 5 such people. Our committee of the Inspirational Expo have chosen these people because they are examples of inspiration. They may not know it, but we can see it. So what the next hour and a half will offer is some inspiring stories about what brought them to who they are and how they worked with Margaret Mead's quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does." Which is, of course, the theme for this particular Inspirational Expo. We have this beautiful program outlining who they are, but I've asked each of them to give us a 7-minute talk about how they are, what they are. And each of you have been given a handout with some example questions so we can keep this hour and a half open. The intent is, of course, so that you can get inspired, so that you can discover who you truly are. For each of us is magnificent, and each of us are powerful beyond measure. We know that. So this is an opportunity to look at yourself and see what's still left to sing from you, and what's in your heart to be passionate about. Because we all have passions. The fascinating story that I once heard was about the little bee. Well, we all know these little bees. They go and do what? They fly out to the little nest and bring honey back for the queen bee. They collect that for food for winter. So what happens is they sometimes fly 2-3 miles away from their nest and bring back that little tiny bit of honey and stick it in the nest. And don't tell them, because what's really happening is that they are making a much more fruitful world. Or if it wasn't for the little bees, we wouldn't have pollinated flowers to bring us fruit. But the question is, does the bee know what they're really doing? So I ask you too, when you go on your everyday journey, you get up in the morning and you live your life, do you really know what you are pollinating, what you're leaving behind, how you are making a better world? So, the panel in front of you is Shelley Yo, Brendan Cullen, Nancy McSwoy, Carleen DeKelper, and Raven Akudu. So, I'm going to let them do the rest of the talking. So Shelley, will you start by sharing your story?
I thought maybe I'd get to be the last one, because I'm last on the page. Is this working? Can you hear me?
Get it closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Okay, how's that? Well, thank you very much to the committee for inviting me. It's indeed an honor, and it was a surprise. And but certainly, you know, when I hear the stories of the folks that are here, and some of them are familiar, and I suppose I've come to doing the things that I do by surprise. I didn't always think that I would be active in my community, that I would have a position, a job in the community that I absolutely love, and that allows me to do what I love to do in the community. I didn't, although perhaps that's where my energy took me, or the energy around me took me. So when I say I didn't know, and I have no, you know, I'm not responsible for it, I certainly think the energy that I created or was around me helped me to do that. And I certainly have had a lot of passion in the work that I do and in just whatever I do, I think. I think a lot of us identify through our work. I work at Women's Community House, providing all kinds of wonderful services for women and their children, and for some men in the community now too, and for families. We're doing an incredible amount of work, and certainly I get to, it's hard not to identify through the work that I do, because it takes up so much of my time and my passion as well. But I do know that at some point that is going to, I'm no longer going to have that work. Although I have a feeling I will continue to do a lot of the things that I still do. I just won't be able to say, when people say, oh, what do you do? I won't say, I work at Women's Community House. I do a whole lot more than that, I think. When we think about the small groups, the quote about how small groups indeed can do a tremendous amount of, make an impact, a huge impact on the world. I do think about Women's Community House and where we started 35 years ago, almost 35 years ago now. And it was a small group of women mostly, and there may have been one or two men, probably partners of those women, who saw a need for people in the community, a couple of women probably, or friends or family members, who were being abused in their intimate relationships, and there was nowhere for those women to go, other than to their friends. But they needed a safe place. They needed a safe place to be so that, for them and their children. And it was that very small group of women, our foremothers of Women's Community House, who found the money. I don't know, how they did it. They found the money to eventually open a small shelter, probably 10 beds, and that's probably all they thought they needed in London. They probably thought this wasn't happening very often. We just need a small place for a few women and their children to be safe. It was on Piccadilly Street, and it didn't take long, and of course it was operated mostly by volunteers. There was no funding to provide counseling or for someone to be there overnight. It was all volunteers. I think that partners with their trucks were helping to pick up things and move women and do all kinds of tasks. And from there, once they noticed that there was a greater need than just a few women, they opened a shelter on Maitland, where we had about 23 beds. And when I started at Women's Community House 22 years ago, that's where I started. We had about 22 beds, 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, if you can imagine, and we were putting 2 and 3 families in one room. When we finally moved out of that shelter, we were packed to the gills. We had women sleeping in the dining room, the living room, all over the place. And again, so we started with thinking that there wasn't a huge need, but there was a need, and beginning to realize that this need was even greater than us. And finally, we're able to get funding through the government, through the community, and a generous donations through our community. And now we have the largest shelter services in the country, the largest secure shelter services in the country for women and kids, with 2 shelters, 67 beds, a 25-unit apartment building providing transitional housing for women and kids, outreach programs for women and men, and a family court support program. And then from that, we continue to have needs for the women and kids that we have in our shelters and our second stage housing programs. And I realized that we weren't getting any more funding for the children's needs. So I sort of looked at what we had, our resources in our organization, and one of our resources is all of the clothing donations that come in the door. We get tons, literally tons of clothing donations every year, and we don't need tons to serve the women and kids in our shelters. So we thought, how else can we use this? Because trucks were rolling up every day and taking away our excess, and they were selling it or making money from it. So we thought, how can we profit from this? And from that, it took a few years for people to buy into it, but we were able to open a store, which is almost 2 years old, called Mine 101. It's on Oxford Street. It's great. And it's unlike any other used clothing store, I think. It's a boutique, in London anyway. It's very boutique-like, and we're all...
So Hank said, you know, I came to speakers, well, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, give or take, and that was a while ago. And back then, I was doing a lot of seeking of my own, being very curious and open-minded. I was just like looking for new ideas and looking to meet people. And through the experiences that I had with seekers and through a lot of stuff that I was going through in my own life, you know, positive stuff as well, I wanted to be able to create a community that was focused more towards my own age demographic. I was doing a lot of research on my own, and I'm like, all right, there's got to be other people who are interested in this stuff too. Like, I want to be able to bring them together. And I started to experience things within this reality, such as like synchronicity, which is, you know, the universal power for one object to be over here and other object to be over here, and yet somehow they just managed to meet at the right place at the right time. I understood that this was a very real thing within this reality, and because of that, I knew that there was a big potential to create community and for people to come together and for that magnetic nature that we all have to act as a draw to bring those people with those similar interests together. So I needed to create a catalyst. So the community that I represent, the reason why I'm here, it's a community within London called Paradigm Shift London. And so just to give you the short end of the stick, or the short, long story short, I think that's the wrong metaphor I used. Yeah. So to give you the short story, Paradigm Shift London is a youth-initiated community that encourages open-mindedness, healthy living, and the evolution of consciousness, and that's kind of the tagline that we put on it. So it started off as a club in Fanshawe College in 2009, and since then it evolved into community meetings that we have every single Friday downtown at a yoga studio. So it's every Friday at 6:45 at the Downtown Yoga Holistic Center. And those meetings basically just encourage open-mindedness, and we also practice meditation. And what is really interesting is that I went to school for the television broadcasting field, which is why I'm, doing two things at once here with the cameras. And what I felt was an important part of this whole shift in consciousness was the fact that we needed to be able to document it. We needed to be able to tell our own story. We couldn't just let it sort of go by. We needed to be able to show what was happening here to inspire others to do the same, keyword inspire. So what started off as, what still is a community in London, has now evolved into 60 communities throughout the globe. So there's paradigm shift communities, there's 25 of them in America, there's more than a dozen in Canada, there's paradigm shift Germany, Netherlands, Japan, Norway, Estonia. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them really. And that was a result of, in June, I started up an online radio show, and we're 30 episodes in now, so I spent the last tonight's going to be the 32nd episode, so I've spent the last 32 Saturdays in my house doing a radio show online, being committed to this. And basically through the radio show, we said, look, this is what we're doing here in London with Paradigm Shift London. You guys should do it too, where you are, and you guys should get together and start having these conversations. Because a big part about Paradigm Shift, and this is something I emphasize, is that a lot of what we're doing is just practice. It's being able to practice having conversations. So the topics that we discuss, a big topic that everybody's always interested in is something like dream exploration. That's usually a big draw for people because everybody dreams. But we really talk about anything and everything, so we can talk about the scientific side of things and how science and spirit are sort of merging now. You can talk about the philosophical end of things. You can talk about the conspiracy side of things. Since you get a lot of youth, there's a lot of stuff going on in the media, and it's just different people are starting to wake up in their own unique ways. We are all kind of on our way back to source, so to speak, but everybody's kind of going back their own way, which is the whole point. Everybody's creating their own experience, and there's no one process towards enlightenment. Everybody is going through their own enlightening experience. So that's what Paradigm Shift is. It's a group, it's a community group, and it's being able to support each other. A big thing that we do encourage is the practice of meditation within our community. And a lot of people have sort of picked up meditation here and there, but it's a really easy thing to sort of lose, it's an easy habit to sort of let go of. But having the community support behind it sort of helps you in the sense that here's somebody else and they're meditating. Why aren't I meditating? You know, what's my excuse? Because so much of what we're doing is like we're creating excuses for ourselves, but through the support of community, it helps empower each other and gives that like formidable network so that we can bounce ideas off of each other. We can say like, oh, you know, this is like, I'm writing down my dreams and here's my experiences. And then that would encourage another person to write down their dreams. So for other people to see other people doing what they do and to do it courageously is an important thing. And I think that's what paradigm shift is. And that's why we need to keep documenting this. And it's something that I'm in for the long haul. Like it started in 2009, we're 4 years into it, and it's, you know, it's indefinite because the main thing, just before I pass the mic off, is to promote this message of unity. And what does that mean? And to encourage people to define that answer for themselves and to not only define it, but to experience it. So that's what the inspiration behind Paradigm Shift is about. So, cool.
Thank you, Brendan.
And swing by our table, we're over there, we got pamphlets and everything, and I run a yoga, seniors yoga class every Tuesday. So,
So thank you, Brendan.
55 plus on paper.
The next person is Nancy McSloy. She used to come to Seekers for years, and then all of a sudden she got involved with a whole new project and unable to join us as often as she used to. So, Nancy McSloy.
Thank you, Hank. And I must say, this is a hard act to follow. Shelley and Brendan, you both really inspired me, as I'm sure Curly and Adam will as well. And I just want to say thank you for being chosen to be on this panel. I feel very honored. And a bit about me, and I'll try not to talk too long as well. So I think I've been an activist for a lot of years, probably before I even knew what the word meant. So because community, neighborhoods, healthy environments, that's all something that's been very important to me. And I've been involved with a lot of different things over the years. And with regard to the latest thing that I've been doing with the Argyle BIA, I was very fortunate. We'll say I was in my 50s when I decided to go back to school and took about a one-year course in community service work. And it's really strange because the whole time, a lot of the projects and things that I did, I really focused them around community. And I did really well. And I'm thinking, well, if I can do this as a project and do so well, why can't we get this out into the community? And that was in 2010. And that May was about a month before I was graduating. I got a call from Phil Armstrong, our city councilor, and he said, I need to meet with you about something. So we got together, and I had done a little bit of work within the Argyle area a couple of years before with Joe Swan and a few others. And he said, you know, you were doing some work with regard to getting VIA started. And I said, yes. And he said, and, you know, things didn't work out. I got put on the back burner. And I said, yeah. And he said, I'd really like to try that again. And I said, okay, let's do it. And I don't think I realized, like I do have a habit of flying by the seat of my pants, which I think you need to do that lots of times. And I probably should say don't try this at home because I'm sure some of the things I'm going to say are probably, they're not unethical, but they're probably not the most conventional in the way that I did them. So anyhow, Bill and I started to get together, and I think he was a little bit surprised because I said, well, we're just going to take this and we're going to run with it. And I don't know, at that time I didn't know where we were running or anything, but started meeting. I remember we met with Irene Matheson and said, can you help us? And I went to Khalil, who was the MVP at the time, can you help us? And oh yes, yes. And I think Irene was really my savior in a lot of ways because we had no place to meet. She offered us her boardroom. She had a filing cabinet that had a lock. She said, you can lock things in. All of a sudden, I turned my home office into the BIA office. Everybody at home started to hate me because the phone calls were coming in on our phone line. But it was an experience, and it was fun. And lots of hours at City Hall, and lots of hours working on funding, like the other two government levels and everything. And I think the biggest thing is to be able to persevere and take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And that's, you know, when you're starting something from a grassroots level like that, that's really, you have to be able to have the perseverance and the dedication to keep it going. but every good thing that happened made it worthwhile. And I thought, okay, it's a business improvement area, but we're going to involve the community. And that to me is really important. It takes, to have a healthy business community, healthy and vibrant, you need to have a healthy and vibrant community. So we started doing some projects, and I remember one night, I love to walk, and I love walking to Kiwanis Park, which in Argyle now we call it the Mini Spring Day. I was walking with my sister, and I said, you know what? I said, we need to have like a real grassroots festival here, an art festival. And she said, yeah, we do. So a few months later, there was some funding available, and I thought, oh, art in the park. So the idea that I had when I was out walking, put it together, we got the funding for it, and we held our first annual Art in the Park celebration last year. It was awesome. We had like about 40 artists from the Argyle area. We had constant entertainment throughout the day. We had food vendors, tried to keep everything really grassroots, really within the neighborhood. And it was our first time. I think we had, something like about 3,000 people attended throughout the day. So it was a huge success. And then that night, we were able to get a blow-up projector and do a movie in the park. And we had about 500 people show up to watch the movie. And so that was just one example of how small groups can get together, because it wasn't just the BIA. We targeted like the different groups, different small groups in the area, worked together, and it was a real community effort. And I think that's something that's very, very important. And Margaret and I were talking earlier about small groups, and small groups are so important. Like you can have your small groups, and then everybody can agree to disagree, and you can get together. And I think that's something that is really so important with community in order to create vibrant and healthy communities. And I think that's key to it. And that has, we've done some other things. Another thing, we decided to do a breakfast with Santa, went into it with nothing. It was a success. So I think Margaret Mead's words are so, so true. And that has been a success. Argyle was really, we were barely on the map, but we're really in a lot of recognition now. And some other things too, like some of the businesses, they had concerns about safety, they had, different things like that. And I think it's a matter of really getting out there, getting to know the community, getting to know the groups, building good relationships, and that's all a big part of the success. And if you can do it in small groups, like a small area and another small area, it can be, it can be just a great place to live, work, and play. So,
Well,
that's
what I'm hearing you
nutshell.
say is that it's a lot of hard work. But when
It
that
is.
hard work makes your heart glow, then you know you're on track.
That's right, and it really is hard work, and I think you really need to have the time to be able to do it, and you have to have the desire to work together,
Thank you.
teamwork.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Carlene was a person very much in her world, the typical world that we all think we desire, until the universe started knocking and knocking and knocking until she finally opened the door, and wow, she has a fascinating story to share. Carlene,
Thank you. I'm really excited.
you want to use the mic?
Oh, sure. Of course I do. Hello, and I'm really excited to be here. And I would like to start with this story here. And Pat, wherever you are, we talked about this when you came to my home and interviewed. Just before that, I've worked 20 years with the federal government. And I really enjoyed what I did. I enjoyed the opportunities. And a new manager came in, and as many of you probably can share that or relate to, is that sometimes the manager can make or break the workplace. And this place that I enjoyed living, I enjoyed working in. And I say living because I was really involved with the work that I did, providing counseling, conflict resolution, got involved with the union, did grievance handling, argument dispute pursued, got involved with women's issues. And so part of me did live there and flourished there, and I enjoyed it. But this manager came in and changed things, and it became a spiraling, toxic environment. And I was thinking about what I would do moving forward in my life and counting the days till I could retire and start doing something more exciting. And life coaching was coming more to London, and I was thinking, this is where I want to go. There were some issues that I was having that just didn't feel right. So I saw last year's brochure of the Inspirational Expo, and I thought, you know what, I think when I retire, I'm going to look into that group. I'm going to look into the seekers, see who they are, see what they're about, and explore them. And that's where I left it. Then I left my 20-year career in public service in December 2011. I spent several weeks with Denise Lynn, who is an amazing person as far as I'm concerned, in California learning about soul coaching, and became a certified soul coach. I spent 21 days walking across the northern part of Spain doing the Camino de Santiago. And when I came back and I was invited to the fall, there was at the fairgrounds, there was a fall. So one of the ladies that is an association with us said, "Carly, do you want to come sit with me and we'll do this?" And I said, yes. So from there came an invitation to speak at London Seekers, became an invitation to sit on the panel, all because I put out to the universe, I wonder who these people are. I want to know more about the group. So that, if I can share anything, is if you want something bad enough, if you're truly interested, put it out to the universe and let it flow. The energy will bring it back if it's what you're meant to do, when you're meant to do. So that brings me to here. But my story, I let my parents know that I was coming into the world maybe a little bit sooner than they would have anticipated. And my childhood was quite good. I have a brother, a couple years younger. My parents will be celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in the next few weeks. And life sort of went on, and I had this idea of what I was going to do when I grew up. I was going to be this great architect and design some of the most amazing buildings in the world. And at 15, I was raped, and my life went out of control. So I really didn't know where I was going to go. Did I have purpose? Was there a reason for me to be here? And I spent several years in a dark space. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's not where I was meant to be. So how do I get out of here, and how do I move forward? I spent some time in California, did some healing, and came back and put some of my own personal goals into place. And mostly those goals weren't about attaining some great achievement or designing great buildings, but just being happy with who I am and recognizing that I'm okay for who I am. And I carried that with me every day. Some years later, I met my soulmate and we got married. And 5 years after that, we had 3 children, 94, 95, 96. And thought that maybe we might want to stop that now. And that's when my 20-year career in public service started. Like I said, I left in December of 2011. The first 8 months of 2012 were really good. I came home from Spain on the 31st of July, and the 1st of August my husband left. So here I am, starting this new journey, exploring it, and thinking about, wow, how do you, when you get a shot in the side of the head that knocks you down, how do you have the courage to pick yourself up? And that truly does come from within. And it comes from appreciating the gifts that you have and really believing in them. I have my own business called It's the Butterfly Effect, where I offer soul coaching, I do reflexology. There's metamorphosis principles that I'm really curious about, so I'm looking into that. And the other thing that I do is executive director of a dream program that I put together called Artistically Speaking Out Against Bullying. So it's taking the children who, I mean, not just children, anybody who's impacted by bullying. So whether you're the bullied, or the bystander, and it's using the arts to rediscover what makes you special, so that when you move forward in life, you're making choices based on feeling good about yourself rather than feeling not as good about yourself, perhaps. I do a lot of work with families whose children are either survivors of suicide or self-harmers. And it's really interesting to work with those families in that dynamic. I work with Type Talk, Girl Guides of Canada, the Special Education Advisory Committee on the Thames Valley District School Board, Parents for Children's Mental Health, and my goal, what I try to aspire to is to help people rediscover their self-worth. Because when you feel good about yourself, when you know who you are, you can make those choices and decisions to move forward and feel confident and comfortable with that. Thank you.
How inspiring that is. Thank you so much, Marlene. And finally, Rabin, you have a story to share. You're working with youth. Tell us what about your life.
Well, thank you, Hank, and thank you, fellow panelists. I'm really humbled to hear your wonderful stories. Actually, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel today. Probably will have a different story compared to my fellow panelists. Hank told me to find something that has inspired me in my life, and that has made a contribution to my life, and that I could sort of share in terms of making a change in the world. So I thought about it, and I thought, what other thing I could think other than the principle of consultation? So this is something which is very clear to me in terms of what it has done in terms of my own life, family life, work, and also in the community. Because it's such a potent principle that is so misunderstood and oftentimes abused, so that we are not really harnessing all the power that is in it.
Repeat that principle again.
The principle of consultation.
The principle of consultation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's again inspired from the higher community in terms of a core principle for advancement of world civilization, and I've tried to apply it in most of my life, and I think I would like to share some insights with you today in terms of how we go about it. Although this is an art which needs to be refined and perfected, nobody is born mastering this art of consultation. But I think it's a principle as well as an art, which is very much at the core of Baha'i sort of action, if you will, in terms of bringing about change, meaningful change in the world. I just would like to cite a little sort of writing first before I start. It says, "Take ye counsel together in all matters, inasmuch as consultation is the lamp of guidance which leadeth the way and is the bestower of understanding." So it's a lamp of guidance and the bestower of understanding. And it's also a potent force for transformation and bringing about change in the world. And if you allow me, I can take a simple example from the mineral kingdom, where substances get combined together and form a unique kind of compound which has different qualities to what the constituent elements have. And I could think of an example like if you take sodium and chlorine, on their own they can be quite toxic. But if you chemically combine the two together, you have salt, and salt is sustaining for life. So the principle of consultation is really about bringing together the diverse elements of humanity together to sort of combine and have collective wisdom, so that we can really seek out the truth in every situation and really find a solution to the problems facing us. So consultation doesn't necessarily apply only to worldwide or embracing matters or things of that nature or strategic things. It can be very personal, intimate things that we apply consultation. I mean, how many of us could have done a better job consulting with our own spouse or children and avoid a lot of hassle, a lot of misunderstanding and wrong perception? It's just using the principle of consultation all the time. So I think this is something that is lacking in many discourses, especially we have a culture of debate where it's very conflictual mutual antagonistic. And this is, true consultation is diametrically opposed to that kind of culture. It is a kind of approach which is more elevated, in my view, and, if you will, a spiritual conference, because it requires an attitude of love and fellowship. In fact, there's a number of prerequisites for successful, for meaningful consultation, and one of them would be love and fellowship. If you can't have fellowship and love between the members of a community, it's very difficult to achieve a consultation in the true sense. You need also to be able to put at rest your ego, which is one of the major obstacles to true consultation, because the ego is always there, and if we don't have control over the ego and other passions, we will obviously prevent the true consultation from operating. Detachment is another one, and really attracting the divine fragrances is another condition for successful consultation. So these are the things we try to apply in our own lives, individually in the community where we work. For example, we just moved to London a couple of months ago, or 6 months ago I should say, and we already in our neighborhood trying to initiate activities where we come from diverse backgrounds, and we, cultures and religions come together, reflect, say prayers, and meditate together, and try to bring a meaningful change to our lives. So this is my story today, and I would like to share with you, and with you, a thought which can inspire you guys as well as inspire me. And this is from the Baha'i writings. It says, when a thought of war comes, oppose it by a stronger thought of peace. A thought of hatred must be destroyed by a more powerful thought of love. Thank you very much.
So now I'll use the microphone again so we can hear you. So thank you so much for sharing your soul with us and inspiring us. So now I know that each one of you has a life to live, and each one of you have a wish list or a bucket list. And I'm not sure how many of these aspects of your bucket list have been shaken or rattled, but now is the time to ask questions on how you can find the courage to get deeper into your soul, to be your authentic self. For these people are demonstrating how they became their authentic self. So if you have a wish, or if you're afraid, or if you're not necessarily encouraged to go deep within, now is the time to ask questions. And how I would like to do that is, if you raise your hand and I nod to you, you will be the next question. So who has the first question? You have the first question? Okay, go for it. Hello.
Actually, something you said that I thought really resonated with me was that ego prevents true consultation, genuine consultation. So my question to the panel would be, it's a lot different. My question to the panel is, when we live in a society that's based upon materialism, do you feel it is just and moral to charge money for consultation? Because I know that a lot of people would wish to be taking a life path and earning a living based upon consulting, but do you think it's a moral and just thing to do in such a materialistic society where you can easily degenerate really fast?
Do you have that to a specific panelist, or do you want to ask everyone?
Whoever can answer.
Okay.
Well, can I offer, because if I may offer, that has been a huge, I have a friend, and she and I are of like mind, and we struggle with that all the time, and that's probably why we haven't received any money. Because if I'm giving you, if you're coming to me, I don't have the answers for you, first of all. If you're coming to me, you have the answer within yourself for whatever it is that you're seeking. Hopefully, I'm the mirror that reflects back to you so you see the answer. And with that philosophy or idea in mind, how do I charge you, or how do I deem what I'm doing and put a dollar value to it? And when I was with Denise in California, that was the with somebody on soul coaching is time you're not with yourself, or you're not with your children, or you're not with. And so she said it's the time that people pay for. And she although there was a pay scale or a fee scale, she said the other thing that you can do, which was where Miss Fran and I were hoping to go, is we leave the jar, and it's whatever you value you feel, that's how much you can put in the jar. That's where.
Does any other panelists have a comment on that, on the material issue? You, Shelley?
If no one else wants to jump in, sure. You know, money is something that a lot of people deal with, but especially when if you're offering some sort of teaching, I mean, to try and put like a price value on it, I think there is some sort of moral implication. I mean, even people can look at it deeper and say there's like a karmic implication in that process. So to reiterate what you said, I agree. At no point, if someone's really saying like, I have the answers and I'm giving them to you, therefore you have to pay me money, like no, like again, you're saying like, I am a mirror reflecting the answers within you. Anything that you want to contribute to me is totally a donation. And I think like donations are a big thing, and like that's where, you know, it matters for a community to be able to say like, look, like this is something we want to support, therefore let's continue to do it, because money in itself, and I mean a lot of people have trouble talking about money. There's, you know, a lot of people have, it's kind of iffy, right? But I mean money is like a form of energy, right? So I mean if you can take something that we recognize as a piece of paper and turn it into like an experience that changes lives, then surely there's some sort of value in that, right? But I mean, to just say that like, oh no, you're just like supporting capitalism or something is kind of a, you know, that's a very like black and white way of looking at it. So it like anything, it is a tool, and how we use it is totally up to us. But again, I think there is some sort of moral implication to demand or to try and put a price or something. But I mean, for myself, like through the paradigm shift community, it does cost money. There is money involved with printing. There is money involved with web hosting. These are just things that we have to deal with. But at no point are we ever going to say that, you know, like you have to pay money to keep doing what we're doing. Because our goal, you know, specifically within paradigm shift, is to make a difference, to shift consciousness, to reach as many people as we can, which is why what we're going to keep doing is always going to be free. But I mean, in order to make even more of it, does it help if the community contributes financially and we use that money wisely? Absolutely. So
it is a very complicated question.
Yeah, very.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay. This question is basically for the panel, generally. A lot has been talked about the popular term 2012, December 21st, 2012, a lot of misinformation, fear, as well as encouraging words, possible awakening consciousness, spiritual DNA activation people talk about. Do you feel anything good has come from this date? Do you feel that we're becoming more liberated in consciousness, more freedom of expression, more spiritual awakening at this time now?
Are you directing it to any one panelist, or are you...
Anyone can answer.
Anyone, okay. Go ahead, Shelley.
Well, you know, from my perspective, and that's the only place I can come from, I would say that yes, indeed. I think that everywhere that I mean, personally, I have been able to access lots of different ways in order to be myself, and I guess when we come back to money, sometimes I've had to pay for that, and often I have to pay for it. People do have to make a living, and they use their gifts to do that. And I think our gifts are all varied and different. They're not always. It's you know, I suppose I have some gifts to share. It wouldn't necessarily be a spiritual gift by any stretch, but within what I do, it is. I think that your question is pretty broad, so I'm going to go broad too. I think that it is a world in which we are able to express in whichever way we want. In many ways, it's much broader than it used to be. It's not in a closet. We all have an opportunity to, you know, it's because of the ability to communicate and to spread news. It's open to many of us. Sometimes it's not available because of money, it's inaccessible because of money in that way, but it's usually accessible in lots of ways. And I think if we are open to different ways of being and different ways of in our own spirituality and faith, then I think it's there. It's always there and available. I don't think that there's a date.
Of course.
There's not an end date. I mean, there may be, but I'm going to pretend that life goes on and not look to that end date. Too much energy.
Brendan, do you have any shift on the shift date?
Well, I guess I think it is appropriate for me to respond to this, just because like I was like right in the middle of it for you know, and with the whole paradigm shift thing, like I started paradigm shift like as commotion about the December 21st date 2012 was starting to come up, right? So I created paradigm shift with the anticipation that more people were going to start to become interested as we approach this date, and now we're past it, now we're here, right? So what does it mean now that we've gone past it? I think there's quite a few ways to look at it, and obviously you can quite simply look at it, it's just a date, it's just a calendars, there's a whole bunch of different calendars, it's just a numerical ordering system, they come and go. So that's one way of looking at it, and if that's the case, then that means December 22nd and December 21st, you know, one day after the other, like tomorrow's going to be a whole new day too, right? So that's cool in that sense. But there are other ideas where the Earth itself, like all things, is constantly changing. Change is the one constant thing throughout this entire universe. So in that sense, yes, like one day is different from the previous day, and as we continue to move forward, whether you wanted to specifically refer to December 21st itself or not, as we continue to move forward, there are aspects within ourselves that are becoming more aware of ourselves. And I think this whole idea of like this shift in consciousness, like what does that mean? In my perspective, it just means like a shift in awareness. And consciousness itself is like a mirror test. It's being able to see yourself in your surroundings. So kind of going back to this theme of unity. Like right now, like I look at all of you, like I might be the one up here talking, and we might have this idea that like I'm Brendan, you're like Joanne, and you're Billy or something like that. But like each one of us is like a fractal, like you know, like a different like finger of the godness that we all are in that sense. Like we're all like branches of that same tree. So if you were to take all those branches and follow it back, there would be like that single seed, and within that seed exists like the entire flower, the entire tree. So to be able to sort of correlate that to time, I feel, and this is something that I've been observing, like I've been able to notice it, and especially through the patterns through the internet and through the revelation of data. Like right now, we are in a renaissance. Like we literally are in a new renaissance. It's this renaissance of new information. It's old information, but it's coming back up to the surface. And for the first time in eons, knowledge that was once like specific to the mystery schools that would get you killed if you talked about it is now openly being talked about within a community. So what do we do with it? So I mean, in that sense, you know, like December 21st, there might have been a lot of hype to it, but I have been saying consistently that like, all right, December 23rd, or like 2013, like that's when the real work begins. Because once we pass that date, like there's no more excuses. A lot of people might have been looking at that date and say like, all right, you know, like it's the be all end all, maybe something will happen, maybe this will like solve my problems or whatever. But now that we've passed that, we have to take responsibility for everything that happens beyond this point, with the understanding that we have a lot of potential to do so.
Beautiful. On December 21?
I'm Jeremy, and I'm the owner of the Multidimensional Mission Show. YouTube channel is called M Dimensional Mission. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I would even appreciate it more if you would like this video, add it to your favorite list, leave comments below this video, subscribe to the M Dimensional Mission YouTube channel, the Multidimensional Mission Show, and check out my blog, the Multidimensional Mission.blogspot.ca, by the way, as well as Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter on the below the link below, as well as my Facebook fan page, The Multidimensional Mission. Check it out on Facebook. And please share it with such social networks as Twitter, Facebook, other social media websites, and tell all your friends about these these topics I talked about. And I appreciate all your support, and never stop asking questions.